Gracias, Salvador. Thank you. I'm going to put Virgil down, right here on this cloud in front of you, so that you can't mistake him for another brother with his mama's curls, Sloven and iguana skin belt, alacran widow in the buckle, a white stinger for protection. I want to howl against the emptiness of this room so that you can't mistake his monsoon for another lowlife passing in the night. Hear the man clank hammers, listen. Listen to his heave-ho. You hear that? This is Virgil, leatherneck foreman of American hoods, king of the desert, of wrought iron and crumbling highways, of enchanted lands and poisonous addictions. This is how he dances when he is right. El Gusano, they call him, the drunken worm of agave, with lime in the cut. When he is wrong, when Virgil is wrong, the dance becomes visceral. His guts rumble, his heart plucks at the ribcage. A throbbing liver keeps tempo. Look, you can see black musical notes slipping from the scars. A sonata of lonesome odes fluttering about his fists. Tattoos bouncing off the skin. A birthmark hangs on at the temple. And for the women who kept him, there were greased engines, rigged pipes, Polaroids, postcards of saints and prayers, in the glove compartment letters of love and promises, a nicked ring, a dollar bill ripped in two, a million unlabeled keys, and somewhere a million doors waiting to be opened. This is Virgil now, in a box, feeding himself to the earth. El Gusano, gobbled by the raven that swoops from the corn husk, watered by this cloud I'm putting him down on, so that you can't mistake him for another brother in a poem. Last time when we were here watching Daniel Chacon give his lecture, I was really fascinated by the fact that this room had the eternal knot above us, which obviously is the nod to the Tibetan architecture of the campus, which is partly why I said I have to go and teach at UTEP one day. In the desert, Tibet? Yes, I'm there. But the eternal knot I thought is perfect because it's really it encompasses the idea also of what I want to talk about tonight, and that's this idea of interconnectedness. And in its most simplistic form, the eternal knot represents interconnectedness of all things. So in this case, it's interconnectedness of all genres. So the title of the talk is called "We Didn't Cross the Genre Crossed Us," which was kind of a joke I made once upon a time. I think maybe it was at a writing conference, and I was I don't know why, we were talking about genres and crossing genres, and I just blurted out, "We didn't cross the genre crossed us," which is kind of obviously taken from this popular chant that you always hear at protests, and you've been hearing since the 60s. We didn't cross the border crossed us. That was always the chant I heard. Especially, I didn't hear about that chant until like the 90s, really, that slogan till the 90s, because that's when I came of age as a young activist in Central California, growing up 20 miles north of where Cesar Chavez was at there in Delano. And I would often hear that. We didn't cross the border crossed us. And so I like that idea, because what that essentially means is that this land, at least in terms of we didn't cross the border crossed us. This land was once Mexico, obviously. We all know that here. But it also means that we are home and that we have a divine right to this piece of geography. It means that before there were borders or lines in the dirt, before there were these imposed structures and systems that we were supposed to abide by, there was our own organic systems and ways of doing things. And so I use this in the same way to suggest that before there were these literary systems, before there were these lines that got drawn regarding labels and genres, there was us with our own organic system of sharing stories, of gathering stories, of disseminating stories since the very beginning. I actually think about the Joan Didion quote, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And then I think about also Jonathan Gottschall, who wrote The Storytelling Animal, in which he says that stories teach us how to live and to make sense of our own experiences, and that stories are our inheritance. And then too, I think about that wonderful joke, which is one of my favorite jokes, and maybe this is a nod to Daniel's very humorous first lecture, but this joke, has anybody heard this joke about the storyteller and the scientist or the physicist? Anybody hear this one now? Okay, good, I hope not, because I'm going to tell it to you. So they were arguing, they were debating over what was more vital to life. What did all of life come down to? Stories, and of course, or atoms. Was it stories or atoms? You know, and of course the breakdown at the end of the day was the scientists argued that everything could be broken down to a single atom. All of life. There was nothing. You, the tables, the chairs, everything, this building, everything in life can be broken down to an atom. That's it. That's it. And of course the storyteller said, and every atom has a story. So in writing programs, more than probably any other place, we often lean heavily into the theoretical foundations, literary canons, techniques, devices within all these respective genres, which is to say that we operate at the highest levels of our intellect. A lot of the times we avoid, and in some cases oppose, the knowledge that comes from within our own bodies. And so to balance the scales, my hope is that I would like to try and counter the mind with the body, and to explore what an instinctual approach to writing, aka a formless approach, can offer to the process of writing. The process of community building also, to the process of empowerment, to the process of personal growth, and the process, probably more importantly, the process of discovery. Ahmed, are you discovering something interesting in that newspaper you're reading there? I thought I'd just call you out because you're my good friend.
I know. Sorry, sir.
That's okay, Ahmed. I should note here that when I say the word formlessness, when I speak of formlessness, I'm going to hear it from Ahmed later. You called me out, man! When I speak of formlessness in this context, it's distinctly different than breaking form. Whereas breaking a form suggests that there is a form that we adhere to and that we deviate from. In the case of formlessness, there is no loyalty at all to form. There is only loyalty to our instincts, to our raw impulse to utilize language and text in whatever manner the subject requires, or whatever manner we see fit. It could be argued that all of writing is a product of one form or another, but there is a difference, I think, between leaning on that form deliberately and not leaning on it at all. This reminds me of the poem that I just read actually is a poem about my Uncle Virgil, who in 1995, he was shot and killed while unarmed in Central California. He had barricaded himself in an apartment with his child, who was about 3 or 4 years old at the time. And he was going through a custody hearing for the child. And he was, obviously, with his own past, he was an orphan as a young boy, growing up here in Deming, New Mexico, and in Las Cruces. He was orphaned. And then when he had his first child, his first son, him and his wife had split up, and she took the boy, and he never saw his first son again. And he spent many, many years searching, traveling around, looking for him, couldn't find him. So now he had a second chance at life, and being a father again. And now he found himself in Central California with his second son, who was now 3 or 4 years old, and he was going through a custody hearing, a battle. And of course, that fueled with alcohol got the better of his own paranoia, and he found himself one night barricaded in an apartment with his child. And one of the things that that was one of the sort of more influential, I think, probably turning points for myself, going from being a visual artist, a painter, into writing suddenly, looking for the words to make sense of what I was experiencing, because my uncle was actually more like a brother to me. He lived with us many, many times. And I thought about the words that the poet laureate Juan Felipe Herrera said in one of his books. He begins his book by saying, "I didn't start out as a poet because I was silenced. I started out needing to say something." And indeed, I started out needing to say something. And I knew that language would be the way that I say it, obviously. I didn't think of form. It was just an impulse. And this ended up becoming, later on, what someone would tell me is an episodic story. "Fuck you, Bernadette!" Alejandro slurred, punching the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. "She's my baby, too." He turned the keys and throws the gear into drive and flies off toward Bernadette's place. He pulls into the alleyway behind the house and kills the engine. He jumps the fence. He pounds his fists on the glass door. "Bernie," he shouts. "Bernie, get your ass out here!" A light turns on from inside. Bernadette sees him outside. "What the fuck?" she says. "You're drunk. Get out of here before I call the cops." But Alejandro isn't having it. She notices the doggish hunger in his eyes and runs to get the baby and head out the front door. He strangles the back door handle and it opens. Before she knows what's happening, he has yanked the baby from her grip and shoved her out the front door. Click. It's 1:47 a.m. and a voice is now blaring from a bullhorn, waking up every neighbor and sending all the dogs into a hysteria. "Alejandro, let the baby out," the bullhorn shouts. "Fuck you," he shouts back. And then a long silence. In her half-sleep, the baby mutters something. "I'm right here, mijita. Daddy's here to sleep," he tells her. He moves her to the couch. He covers her head with a cartoon blanket. He peers between the curtains. A gun is propped behind every bush, every parked car, a rifle aimed and cocked. "Release the baby," the bullhorn says. Alejandro says nothing. He stares at the photos on the wall, notices the one where his image is cut out and only Bernadette and the baby remain. The bullhorn shouts again. This time he opens the curtains, just enough now to stick his hand through and flash the middle finger. "Don't do anything stupid, Alejandro," the bullhorn calls out. And again, he flips them off. This time with both hands. Every time they call for him to release the child, he responds by opening up the curtains and exposing a bit more of himself. It comes through the window like a ray of light. The last thing he sees upon falling to the floor are the baby's little eyes waking up to watch him fall. Everywhere there are frequencies and satellite waves rippling out into this questionable night. Words and sounds and translucent images and siren lights and helicopter beams and white sheets and black faces reporting live from distant scenarios, all rising up now in a flotilla, defying Earth's gravity into a single streamlined thread, building up to a flurry of mixed signals and words. And at the end of that thread, at the very end of that thread, Alejandro, poised in the television box of another man's living room.